All right, this is my conversation with Ted Nguyen. We're going to get to that in a second. Don't forget, if you're watching this video, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Appreciate it very much. More content coming. If you're listening to the podcast, great. You can check out the video down in the description. For those watching, you can check out the audio down in the description. Anyway, send me a message by going to heyguy.co. There's a contact form there. You want to get into the mailbag, or you just may want to sign up to be notified when hats go on sale. Aiming for early August. Get you some updates on that soon, but updates will be there. So heyguy.co. All right, here we go. Let's dive into it. All right, I'm very excited to have Ted Nguyen today, who covers the NFL for The Athletic. He's a fantastic film analyst, very insightful, interesting writer. Just wrote a piece about the Packers offense that is definitely of relevance. He grew up a Raider fan in a Niner household in the Bay Area, and really, I would say, came to like big time prominence analyzing the Raiders on the internet, and now covers everybody on the internet. So it's great to have you, Ted.
Yep, the OG followers known me as Raiders Analysis back on Twitter, but I had to change that when I joined The Athletic to be less biased, and I was okay letting go of that name because when it was shortened on Twitter, all people saw was Raiders Anal, so that wasn't a great reflection on me.
That was not a good decision there by Tim Kawakami to get you to broaden things out. So there's so much stuff I want to ask you about, and there's a few. I gave Ted ahead of time a few like 3 Niners questions that I wanted to get your kind of alternate universe thought on. But before that, and we also should mention you are on YouTube, right? Ted Nguyen NFL is your YouTube channel. So people can check out some videos that you've done. I actually saw one the other day and then made a video based off your video. So I'd like to get your thoughts on it. But what were you doing before you were an NFL writer for The Athletic? I came to know you as the guy doing film breakdowns on social media. But like, had you been in media for a long time? What were you doing before you became Raiders film analysis on Twitter?
It's a long story. I'll try not to keep it too long, but when I graduated, actually when I was in college, I was coaching high school football. I played high school football, and I knew I wasn't good enough to be a college player, and my coach asked me to come back and help coach a team. So I was doing that while I was in college. I really fell in love with coaching. I thought that was something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And but in order to be a coach, you have to be a teacher at the same time. So I was pursuing my getting my teaching credential. And then when I actually became a teacher, I hated teaching. Like I loved coaching, but I would just like count down the minutes till after school came and I get to go on a football field, because teaching was just not my cup of tea. Like, you know, it's like pulling teeth with some of these high school kids and trying to get them motivated. And then while I was teaching, I had a blog about the Raiders I was doing for fun. My friends thought I was knowledgeable in football and wanted me to kind of apply it to analyzing the Raiders, which I did for a long time. And I was just doing it for fun. I didn't think anything would come of it. And then my Twitter started growing. More people started reading my blog. And then I actually I found out I had a gene that put me at 80% risk of getting stomach cancer. And my 2 options were to get my stomach completely removed or to keep getting tested for stomach cancer. But it's very hard to find stomach cancer because it grows flat. So I actually got my stomach removed. And after they removed my stomach, they found out I had traces of stomach cancer. So I did it right in time. And after that, during my recovery period, I knew I couldn't go back to teaching because I had to do something less strenuous. So I just kind of focused my blog, and then I made a decision to jump full time and really try to pursue a career in media. And you know, I quit teaching. I started blogging more, writing, you know, little pieces for various websites. And then one day I got a call from Jimmy Durkin, and him and Tim Kamikawi read my work and they were interested in hiring me at The Athletic. So I got hired at The Athletic. They asked me to cover the Raiders and Niners. So I covered both teams. That year, both teams didn't make the playoffs. So I volunteered to write about some of the playoff teams. I wrote about the Vikings and Eagles. And then one of the Vikings coaches actually, I don't know who it is. They didn't tell me who it is. I kind of suspect it was Kevin Stefanski, but he contacted The Athletic and said it was the most accurate article he's ever read. And then they hired me full time after that to cover the entire league.
That's awesome. An amazing story. And I mean, in terms of your health, like, is that still something you have to, from a health standpoint, does that still require pretty regular monitoring, or is that annual, or what's the post, cancer kind of situation like for you?
Yeah. So, having no stomach sounds like a crazy thing to have to deal with. But I think I've gotten kind of used to it. I just have to eat a little bit slower than normal. I can't have too much sugar. And I do have to get like a monthly vitamin shot because there's some vitamins that your stomach absorbs that I can't absorb, obviously, like B12. So I just get those monthly injections. I get my blood work done regularly to make sure my vitamin levels are good here and there. But yeah, I mean, I've gotten pretty used to it. I feel like I've gotten some size back. I was 200 pounds before surgery, and like 2 months after surgery, I went down to like 140. So I'm like back at 170, trying to get back to 180. But yeah, life is pretty normal, and you can see from my social media posts, I still enjoy eating and trying new foods. So if I don't tell people about it, I don't think they even would know I don't have a stomach.
No, that's and football_film analysis on Twitter. And I say that because it's like you've got basically 100,000 followers. I've followed you for many years. And I see some of your stuff that's more personal, right? Like on Instagram, maybe a photo of you and the dog, or some different places you're eating or whatever. But it's funny, like on the internet, and I'm sure you get this, where people are like, "Oh man, I've read you for years. I hear your voice. I read your articles, kind of know you, but really don't know anything." So it's cool to get to know you a little bit through that story. That's amazing. What high school and what college did you go to before we start diving into some stuff?
So I went to Mount Eden High School in Hayward, and then I went to UC Davis. Yeah, my Aggie.
Oh yeah, I'm from Davis.
Aggie?
No, but I grew
Okay.
up. I went to high school, Davis High School, the only high school in Davis, Blue Devils. So who was the football coach when you were there? That was pre Dan Hawkins, but post Jim. It wasn't Jim Soker.
It was a coach right before Ron Gold took the job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I forgot his name.
But that was their new football stadium.
Yeah, it was a new football stadium.
Woodstock Pizza.
Yes, Woodstock Pizza. Go downtown, and I can't even remember all the names. But I had Burger and Brews the other day.
Oh, Burger and Brews, a good spot.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was in Sacramento. They actually have 2 locations there now, but it brought back a lot of good memories.
Yeah, it's a good spot. All right, so there's a few different things I wanted to jump into with you. Since you've got a piece coming out, we're recording this before it's out, but it will be out by the time people see this, on the Packers and Jordan Love. I had on my list actually to ask you kind of what you think the impact of Jeff Hafley is going to be on the Packers, because to me, that's on my list of things that's almost a little underrated this year. And rightfully, Jordan Love and LaFleur getting a lot of attention. But for people who are, and I don't know where you're at with, if you make a pick, or like, you think the Packers are going to win the division or the conference or whatever. But yeah, what's your take on Green Bay's offense then? Like, what is the meat of that article? And then I'd be curious too, like, how much does Hafley kind of change their ceiling, if in any way, for you when you look at the NFC and Green Bay?
Yeah, watching the offense, I was just kind of blown away by how many young players they have that are ready to emerge. Like, they don't have a true number one receiver yet, but they have a bunch of guys that might be number ones, really high end number two type of guys. I mean, obviously everybody knows Christian Watson has that type of ability to be a number one receiver if he can stay healthy, and he's gone through, he's got his hamstring checked out, and they kind of talked about some imbalances with both his legs that maybe he's going to get corrected this year and hopefully could stay healthy. But if he could be that true number one guy, you have Romeo Dobbs, who is a really underrated route runner. I was watching him, and I was kind of I was like, wow, this guy's a really good route runner. Maybe one of the top 10 type of route runner in the league. I think if he could hang on to the ball a little bit more, he could be a legitimate number 2 receiver. And then you have Reed, who is kind of like a Deebo Samuel, where they're going to hand him the ball. They're going to give him the ball short. Yak type of receiver. He could also kind of beat you in the intermediate parts of the field. They have Wicks, they have Melton, and then their tight end room has 2 potential guys that could be really good, and Luke Musgrave and Tyler Croft too. And then they signed Josh Jacobs, and Josh Jacobs had a near offensive player of the year the first year that Josh McDaniels was there. And one of the reasons was he played a bunch of too high defenses. Teams were really scared of Devontae Adams and the deep ball, and they played a lot of too high. And I think he's going to be able to have that same type of impact he had that year, because teams are going to sit back against this Packers offense. I think they have a lot of deep threats, and I think Jordan Love is really ascending into becoming a top 10 type of quarterback. Before I really went on my deep dive into their offense, I wasn't buying the Love hype just yet. I thought people were a little too early. Some people were calling him some people were projecting him to be a top 5 quarterback as soon as next year. But watching him and watching the type of plays he made down after down, I know he kind of ended the season with a terrible interception against the Niners in that playoff game. But just watching his growth throughout the years and the rare type of throws that he could make, and his running ability and with the size, I really see I could see him cracking that top 10 this year, especially in that offense with LaFleur, who I think is one of the best play callers in the league, calling plays for him.
Can you tell how much freedom LaFleur gives him?
There was a play against Dallas where he used a hard count, and he saw the defense kind of inching up, so he knew that they were in a cover 0. It looked like he changed protection. He might have changed the route concept. I don't know if he changed the route concept or not, but he definitely changed the protection, kept the extra tight end in, and they were able to block that cover 0 blitz perfectly. And he throws a dime into the end zone for, I think it was the first touchdown against the Dallas Cowboys. So I think he does have the freedom to change protections. I'm not sure if he has that kind of all-around freedom to change the play into whatever he sees necessary just yet. But I think he has some ownership of the protection.
It'll be interesting to see. I don't know if you have a take on whether Brock Purdy should or shouldn't have ownership over protection this year. But, I think there are some, definitely like Niner fans, there are a lot of people after the Super Bowl kind of hoping that he will.
Yeah.
In hopes that he can, I thought when the Niners drafted Trey Lance, there was some acknowledgement like that Kyle Shanahan would be willing to loosen his grip a little bit, right? Because when you get a player that talented, you have to let them be themselves. And obviously that didn't work out, but I wonder if this like healthy off season for Brock, which means more face time with Kyle, will give Kyle a trust in him. And maybe it's not a trust issue for Kyle. Maybe it has nothing to do with that. I don't know. But do you have a feeling on that?
Yeah, to me, I think that is the next step for this offense, is to give more ownership of not just protection, but for Brock Purdy to be able to change the play into what he thinks is the right play. We know with the Niners, he hasn't had a quarterback that could stay healthy and be in place for a while, and Brock Purdy is going to be that guy coming into his 3rd year. So I think, from what I remember, I do think that Matt Ryan had some freedom when he was Shanahan's quarterback in 2016, the year they went to the Super Bowl. So I think it is a trust issue as far as, can he get some stability in the position? Can that player show master, or I can't even think of the word right now, but
mastery.
Yeah, mastery of the offense, and earn that trust to be able to not just kill a play, which they have in their system, but to change it from one play to a play that's not even, that the coach might not even have in mind, just based on what he sees on the field. And I think yeah, I really think that's the next step for him, especially against defenses like the Chiefs defense, where they could, they could just it's hard to predict what they're going to do until you're on the field. And I think giving the controls to the quarterback will take this offense to the next level if you could handle that.
It was eye opening. I remember before that Falcons Super Bowl in 2016. Actually, let me pull it out here. I wrote it down and I kept it, and I love looking back at it, and I still haven't memorized it. But they did an interview like the week leading up to the Super Bowl with Matt Ryan and Kyle Shanahan kind of sitting together. And the point of the interview was how Matt, who had already become like he was already, he was not a young player per se anymore, how he had to adjust to Kyle and how they had to adjust to working together, and how in the end, maybe early, there was some butting heads is probably too strong, but just in the end, it kind of came together. So they're sitting together, and the interviewer asks Matt Ryan for a play call with Kyle sitting there. And so Matt says, exit to east, right, nasty, 2-scat Cherokee, can 3-scat, both hammer over. And the interviewer asks for what that play is. Mm-hmm. And Matt describes it, and he gets it wrong. Kyle's like, actually, the receiver, the X is on the other side, or whatever the correction was, And I just remember thinking, like, holy smokes. Like, Matt Ryan just did that whole thing. This is Matt Ryan. He's the MVP of the NFL this year. He's about to play in the Super Bowl, and he got that play wrong. Like, how overwhelming that must be. I just think about it all the time when I see, like, Brock, just how overwhelming it must be or maybe it's not overwhelming, and that's the beauty of him. How challenging it is for those guys.
Well, if you look back historically, quarterbacks in this system typically struggle in their first year. Matt Ryan struggled in his first year in Shanahan's offense, and his second year, that's when he took off. And there is a lot of verbiage. It's kind of old school. And, there's some new school offenses that really cut down on the verbiage, but that kind of limits you as far as being able to adjust plays on the fly, because, the reason why those plays are so wordy is because you're giving everybody their jobs. And if you decide you want to tweak what this guy does, you could just tweak what he does in the language in the play call. But if, let's say, you have a one-word play call for everything, then it's harder to say, okay, now if I say that one-word play call, I want you to do this different thing. It just kind of adds a lot of confusion to it. So when you're just giving everybody their jobs, it actually makes it easier for the rest of the offense, but very tough on the quarterback, obviously.
Yeah. We can talk about Brock some more. I'd like to. Actually in a different context, but one thing I told Ted, for people watching or listening, one thing I told Ted was I wanted to give you a few kind of hypotheticals. I don't know if hypotheticals are the way to think about them, but a few scenarios. And given how well-versed you are in the film, these are things we talk about a lot. So we already kind of talked about one, which was just protections. But the number one thing I wanted to ask you was this. There's so much talk about the inevitable impending departure for Deebo Samuel. Like, he's talked about now, like, this is without a doubt, 2024 is going to be his last year on the team, and then something else will happen for them in 2025. And there are a lot of things contractually that point to that. I think historically he's been such an important player to Kyle Shanahan that I'm not convinced. But the question is, what happens if you subtract Deebo Samuel from this offense? And in your mind, should there be an effort by them to make him a Niner beyond 2024, to keep him a Niner beyond 2024?
I mean, this is how I always thought of it. I always thought, like, if you commit to Deebo Samuel in the future, that's a bet on your system staying in place. And if you bet on Brandon Ayuk, that's a bet on Brock Purdy becoming more of the offense, because Deebo is a essential part of this system working, playing positionless football, being able to put him in the backfield and, being able to move Christian McCaffrey around. And that is a Niner system. Even when he's not getting the ball, just having him line up in the backfield is going to, cause the defense to kind of haywire, because they're trying to adjust, and that could cause confusion. And the Niners are so good at taking advantage of that confusion. So not having on the field, it just limits what they could do systematically to confuse defenses and take advantage of just as multiplicity. And and then you have to yak. It's just an easy button to throw the ball to him short or hand the ball off to him. I mean, remember against the Lions when nothing was working for them on offense, you just throw them the screen, let them break 3-4 tackles, or hand them off the ball, let them break 3-4 tackles. So if you lose that part of the offense, you lose that easy button. But theoretically, if you're putting Ricky Pearsall in there, a route runner who could go downfield and beat defenders, and you combine that with Brandon Ayuk, who is that classic type of receiver, then you're leaning more on the passing game. You're not leaning on that kind of trickery and easy button that Deebo gives you. You're leaning more on, all right, Brock Purdy is going to be this classic drop back passer and win on the 5-step drop game, 7-step drop game. So that's how I look at it, and I think based on what we've seen with Purdy and the way he's progressed, I would think the Niners would lean that way. And another factor that you have to consider is, Deebo's injury history and whether or not he can continue getting the ball at the rate he's getting the ball into the future.
Yeah, it's. I was just looking. I couldn't find it quickly, but I looked the other day because somebody brought it up to me. Oh, I was watching the Niners. They do their state of the franchise, and John Lynch told the story that has been out there a few times about how he goes down in the locker room at halftime at the NFC Championship game that you're talking about. And Deebo's like, just tell him to give me the ball, And sure enough, Deebo gets the ball like immediately. I think McCaffrey got the first touch, but then Deebo got the next two. And they just go to Deebo. And, on one hand, it's the evidence of how important. Even Kyle says in that clip, too, Kyle says, yeah, like I didn't need him to tell me. As if like Kyle knew exactly this is what I got to do. I got to get the ball to Deebo. So like you said, he's kind of this emergency button that you're trying to graduate from with a quarterback that can maybe handle more of that for you. But he also has put the team on his back in a way that basketball players sometimes do. Football players don't often do, And so there are people who really think the Niners should throw the football more this year, or that they will throw the football more. Maybe. I mean, they were 30th in pass rate or whatever. And I looked at it a few days ago. If they just go from like 52% to 58% pass rate, Purdy's now 38 touchdowns, which was Matt Ryan's number. You're gonna have a chance to lead the league if you throw 38 touchdowns. That's 14 picks. Can he throw it more and maintain the efficiency? Because there's no guarantee you maintain the efficiency just because you start throwing it more. But it sounds like you're saying if they are going to move on from Deebo eventually, and that is a natural progression of the offense, they kind of have to do that. Is that what you think?
I mean, if you do, if they can't work out a deal with Ayuk and they decide to recommit to Deebo, then, maybe Ricky Pearsall, develops into a receiver that can produce like Ayuk. Maybe he can't, but you're still going back to that system, still going back to playing that positionless type of football, and you're not playing kind of the classic drop back game that most teams with good quarterbacks lean into. And I think that's still a bit of a question. I mean, the Niners don't have a lot of comeback wins. They typically win when they're ahead, and they're ahead a lot of times. But I think when you take away the threat of the run and you're kind of stuck in a pass heavy script, can Brock Purdy win you games? I think that question is still up in the air right now.
Oh, got to tell you about CIRCA contest. CIRCA Million, CIRCA Survivor, both are massive. You go to Nevada and you can play from anywhere. Go to circasports.com, click on contest to find out more. There are two different contests, total $16 million in guaranteed prizes. $6 million in guaranteed prizes for the CIRCA Million. You pick 5 games a week against the spread during the football season. And then at the end, they added up whoever did the best wins the money. Whoever did the worst gets $100,000. I guess you could aim for that. Get maybe 4 buddies together if you want to get the entry, and then you can all contribute 1 per week. There's also CIRCA Survivor, which is you pick 1 game a week, can't use the same team twice, no spread, just straight up. The person who lasts the longest wins, or the persons who last the longest win. Last year, it was a $9.2 million pot split among 4 people who each won $2.3 million. It was the largest legal football contest in history. This year, the pot's guaranteed to be at least $10 million. These are both awesome. You go to Nevada, either Reno, Henderson, or Vegas. So if you're going to Vegas, Niners Raiders playing Vegas preseason. That's going to be in the window where you can sign up for this. I may be there. We'll see. Enter Nevada, play from anywhere. CircaSports.com/CircaSports.com. Click on contest. Okay, Ted Wynn. Where can Brock Purdy be materially better? Right? Like how does he become a better? It's his first full off season, right? But how does he, as still a very young player, how can he become better this year?
I think the main thing is experience and being able to kind of recognize those exotic looks that teams are giving you and have answers for those. Because I think he played better than his numbers in the Super Bowl, but there was just some curveballs that Steve Spagnuolo threw him that he just didn't have an answer to. And I think with experience and seeing those things and getting those reps in your head, and understanding how to beat them, I think that's how you get to the next step. So to me, I think it's just all about experience and just learning from what you see. So I think he's on the right path, but still, we want to see him come out victorious when it's a pass heavy script and he has to do it on his own.
Or you're coming from behind.
Mm-hmm.
When you think of Spagnuolo, what play from the Super Bowl best represents what you're talking about? Was it the third down, not the Chris Jones third down in overtime, but the third down of the 2-minute warning? That's what comes to my mind. I don't know if I don't want to put a.
Yes, that's it. I remember the situation, but I don't remember the exact play. But I think there was a really good disguise in that play. But unfortunately, I have to pull it up to kind of give you the details on it. But I did write about the Spagnuolo game plan afterwards, and it was one of those game plans that was just a good example of a defensive masterpiece that's kind of like reminiscent of what Belichick has done to some offenses.
Yeah, I mean your defense holds them to 19 points in basically 5 quarters of football. You got to feel pretty good about that. Okay, the last kind of hypothetical I had for you on the Niners was this: true or false? After the quarterback, the most important player to the team in 2024 is Fred Warner.
I thought about this, and I think I'm going to go with Nick Bosa over Fred Warner. Even though the linebacker corp is thin with Dre Greenlaw and his injury, and how it's questionable to if he could be 100% early in the year. To me, just looking at this defensive line and this type of system is so dependent on having not just a good pass rush, an elite pass rush, elite 4-man pass rush. And when you look at the defensive line, they have a bunch of very good players. Hargrave, I don't think he's a very good player, but you can't put him in that class of Justin Simmons or Chris Jones. And Malik Collins is a good player as well. Leonard Floyd's a very good player as well. But their only elite player is Nick Bosa, and he kind of like makes that line complete. He's a force multiplier. People give attention to him, and it makes all the other guys' jobs easier. But when you take him out of the equation, you still have a very good defensive line, but you don't have that elite defensive line that's become like this ingrained identity of the Niners.
What did you think of his year? That's a good answer. I mean, you're right. The load in that question was the lack of depth at linebacker without Dre Greenlaw, right? And like just obviously, I think there's a chance their secondary is better this year. They've invested there and they drafted there. They went free agency there, so we'll see. But that was the question. Where were you, Ted, last year on Bosa? He has the long extended holdout, and then he's coming off of basically like 34 or 5 sacks combined the previous. I think it might have been 35 combined sacks the previous 2 years, and has a much lower output. But then you look at some of the PFF stuff, and he's graded just as highly. But then he says, yeah, the holdout affected me. And it felt like he was disruptive and maybe not getting to the quarterback as much. What did you think when you look back at Bosa's 23 season? Was it on par with the level of player that he is in most ways, except for the raw sack number? Or did you think he was somehow not quite himself at some point?
You know, when I watched him, I thought he looked like the old Nick Bosa. I think the defense was a little just out of sorts last year. They just never were, played at the same level that they played in the previous couple years. And they, Niners coaches have talked about that and getting more in sync with the pass rush and the coverage. So I think they both matter. Like if you have lapses in coverage, it's going to be hard to get those sack numbers because guys are open a little bit quicker, and you don't have that extra half a second to get a sack. So I think for him, he holds himself to a certain standard, getting to a certain sack number, and he wasn't able to reach that. And I think part of that was the secondary. Part of that was just kind of the discombobulation of the defense altogether. But I mean, he looked pretty good to me, especially towards the end of the year.
Yeah, I would imagine offensive coordinators probably were like, yeah, same dude.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so there were a few. Those were a few of the hypotheticals you answered. You wrote a piece the other day about a lot of the college coordinators, and I think maybe the Niners will win a Super Bowl this year. I don't know, but I do think that there was like a 2-year window in the division that has kind of been missed. And we'll see how good the Rams are. Cardinals, I think, will be a little better. I don't know where you're at on Seattle, but the Ryan Grubb addition, he doesn't get all of the attention because Mike McDonald's the head coach who deserves a lot of the attention in Seattle. But it's someone who covered the Pac-12 in Washington for a long time. Like people who work with Ryan Grubb think he's a genius. So I'm curious what you think when you kind of dived in on him and on Seattle. Where are you at with the Seahawks? Like, are they capped by their quarterback? Are they have so much offensive talent now, a new coach and kind of a fresh approach? Are they good enough to threaten the NFC West? Where are you? Like, what do you think it's going to look like for them this year?
So I'm a big fan of Mike McDonald because, especially what he did defensively with the Ravens, because I think with him, it's not just a system that he has as far as, oh, we're running cover 3 and 4-man pass rush. His system is we're gonna teach everybody's jobs. We're teaching blitz patterns, and by doing that we could interchange people, put them in different positions. And when you look at his system, it's all based on how players learn things and how they can recall things, and it just allows them to kind of really mix things up and make things very confusing for defenses. So I like his way of thinking about football, and I think teaching is an underrated skill in football, and I think it could apply to the entire team, not just defense. So I'm a big fan of what he does. I don't know if they have the defensive talent to be a top tier defense just yet, but I think just having him call plays there, they're going to be better than they have been. I mean, they've been pretty bad the last couple of years. I'd expect them to at least be, maybe a baseline average this year. And offensively, I love what Ryan Grubb did at Washington. I watched his teams, and I always thought this looks like a pro style type of offense. But I always think it's a big question mark, with the play caller moving from college to the NFL, because it's a different game as far as game planning, especially with protections. But he is a former offensive line coach, so maybe he has kind of a leg up there. But the big thing with offensive coaches moving from college to the NFL is handling protections. Sometimes their protection schemes are too simple, and they get to the NFL and they have to deal with all these exotic blitzes, these great pass rushers, and they don't have a plan. But he's going to have to deal with McDonald's defense in training camp all summer, so maybe he'll have a bit of an advantage there. But I do love Grubb's offense. I do love the potential of his offense based on what he did in Washington. But I always think is a question mark when you're making that jump.
Yeah, the thing I tell people about him is, and maybe I think it's partly probably, there's a few factors. Like, he worked with a coach in Kalen DeBoer as his head coach that he knew really, really well. They had a lot of trust, and Kalen was an offensive guy. They had a quarterback they really trusted. They had skill guys they had receivers they really trusted. But they did some gutsy things. Like, they ran an end around on like 4th and short in their own territory to Jalen McMillan. Like, they did some stuff that was He did not call plays afraid. And
Mhm.
again, like I said, you could argue, well, he's got Michael Penix and Roma Dunze and Jalen Polk and Jalen McMillan. Like, he's got a lot to trust. And maybe that'll, I don't know. But I do think my feeling on Seattle is they did a cool thing in that they kind of upgraded in a way. But it feels like maybe they will be able to keep some of the best stuff of Pete Carroll in terms of just aggressiveness. What you're saying about Mike Macdonald, like, is just an interesting kind of holistic approach to football that Pete Carroll really valued. You know, there was a time where they were going through some of the names. And I thought, well, if you're a Niner fan, like, McDonald is not, he's going to maintain this level of physicality that's probably important there. And Grubb is going to, I think, be pretty buttoned down and organized. And, you know, they always kind of felt like you could find some cracks with them. Not always, lately. And I don't know how good they're going to be, but I do think they're going to be a pretty clean operation. That's my guess.
I mean, if he could get the defense to being a baseline average, I mean, they were so bad at run defense for the last couple of years, and obviously when you're playing a team like the Niners, that's going to be that's hard to overcome. And offensively, if they could protect Geno Smith, he's not an elite quarterback, but he's a very good quarterback. If he could have just some better protection, because on third down that line was just atrocious. So if they could protect him on third down, we know the type of receivers they have in Seattle. I think that the offense can surprise people, but there's a lot of question marks. Obviously, like we talked about, Grubb's question mark. Even though we think he could be good, they didn't really add any huge signings or additions to their offensive line. And we'll see how if McDonald's can work his magic with the defense. But I do think they'll be a better team. I don't know if they're gonna contend for the NFC West title just yet, but I don't think that the Niners are gonna blow them out like they have.
Is there an obvious evolution to the Niners defense with you? Like, is there something Sorensen takes over, but Brandon Staley comes in, since we're talking about Seattle? Brandon Staley comes in. Like, is there, I don't know, do you think there's a curveball or any sort of evolution for the Niners defense coming this year?
So I talked to some of the Niners assistant coaches, and I can't pronounce the name right now. Defensive line coach.
Chris Kasarik.
Kasarik was very adamant that they're going to be a four-man. Their team is an attacking front. They're going to based on their four-man pass rush, and Staley's not going to change that. And because Staley was a odd front guy, more of a gap and half type of system. So I just kind of asked him, will there be some of that influence there? And he pretty much shut the door on that. They're going to do what they do, but Staley is going to influence the defense as far as just helping them change up some of their looks, and adding. He's going to work more with the secondary, so I think they're going to disguise a little bit more with Staley. They are going to run some odd front stuff, but they're not going to be running. They're not going to try a two gap. They're going to be running some more odd front, but they're going to be attacking. So just kind of mixing up the looks. And they said Staley also helps them see things from an offensive perspective. So I think he's going to help game plan and add in some tweaks within our game plan. So week to week, they're a little bit more tailored to each offense they see.
Interesting. It seems like Sorensen's got a very good level of. In other situations, this could be threatening. Yeah. But the fact that Nick played and was the type of player that he was, and then has been in the organization as long as he has, it feels like they actually have got that it's not as risky for them as it could be for other teams. There's no way to know that, but I don't know. Shanahan, they always have a pretty good collection, right? Go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, they definitely wanted to go back to that Seattle system, and just being kind of uniform in going back into that system and running things the way they did. But I think adding Staley also, you could add some new ideas and some more tweaks to that system. So I think he kind of raises the ceiling a little bit as far as schematically.
All right. Is there a team that you feel like, and like everyone's on the Packers are an example, and maybe that's the answer. Is there a team that you feel like maybe, or a take that you have this year that you feel like you're a little ahead on? Is there a team you kind of like that maybe everyone doesn't like yet that you think is going to be good, or a quarterback, or so do you have what's a take right now that you feel like, this is a pretty good take of mine?
I got it was the Packers, but I feel like everybody kind of has the Packers as their like hot up and coming team.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a team that could kind of sneak up on people. I mean, I think the Colts are going to be very good. Pretty high on Anthony Richardson. I liked him coming into the draft process. I thought in his short sample before he was hurt, he showed a lot of progress as a pocket passer, and he kind of made an interesting quote. He said he thought playing the NFL was easier in college, and I kind of think I know what he's talking about because at Florida he had very little help. His offensive line was decent, but his receivers dropped a ton of passes. Pearsall wasn't the Pearsall that he was last year. Some of the play calling was pretty terrible, and then you get into the Colts situation where you have pretty decent receivers. And to me, Shane Steichen is one of the best play callers in the league. I really loved what he did in Philadelphia, and you saw what happened without him there. So I think the Colts made some interesting picks. They added some people I think that could be a really good team next year, especially if Richardson progresses the way I think he will.
God, if that's true, the AFC, I mean, even if it's not true, but if that's true, right, you just think about the AFC is going to be such a bear. With Harbaugh, the Chargers ceiling has to rise. It's just what happens every time he's there. The Bills, the Chiefs, now the Texans
are going to be very good.
The Ravens, the Bengals, Burrow healthy again for now, right? Like, are you the Texans or another? The Texans kind of feel like the AFC Packers in a sense, where everyone's like, yeah, we don't have to wait another year. The Texans are here. Like, I think there's going to be some. When we get to the beginning of the season or right before, I think there'll be some articles about the Texans or the dark horse AFC champ, or I don't know if they're a dark horse, but so I don't know. Are you with that on Houston too?
Yeah, I mean, CJ Stroud was just phenomenal last year. I didn't think anybody would play up to the level of Justin Herbert did. Justin Herbert as a rookie. But I mean, he blew me away with the things he was doing, just within the pocket, pre-snap, and I think he's going to take another step next year, especially adding Stephon Diggs into an already loaded wide receiver core. And D'Amico Ryans had a defense playing really well towards the end of the year, and they added a bunch of new players too. So I mean, it's the NFL; you never know what's going to happen, but it does look like the Texans are ready to take that next step. I mean, they made it a divisional game last year when nobody expected to even be a playoff team. Yeah, I think that team's going to be they're going to be one of the top contenders in a loaded AFC.
I mean, think about it. Last year, here are the teams that made the playoffs. All right, Baltimore, Buffalo, Kansas City, Houston, Cleveland at 11-6, Miami, and Pittsburgh won 10 games. That means last year the Bengals and Joe Burrow didn't make the playoffs. Indy didn't make the playoffs. Aaron Rodgers didn't play. The Jets didn't make the playoffs. The Chargers won 5 games. So I mean, if just one of those teams that I mentioned that missed the playoffs is going to make the playoffs, right? If the Chargers are much better, if Cincinnati's back in the mix, even Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence, maybe they get a little better. But you mentioned Indy. I mentioned the Jets. So, okay, I guess it's just easy to say, oh, well, Cleveland and Pittsburgh won't make the playoffs this year, and 2 of those teams will make the playoffs. But it never quite works that way. And Mike Tomlin doesn't miss the playoffs. So, it really is. The AFC is just, it feels to me like, just as a half-cocked opinion, like, is this as good as a conference can get? Like, it's pretty damn good. I would not want to be in the AFC right now.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that until you start just reeling off the teams. I'm like, yeah, who is going to miss the playoffs out of this group?
I mean, Like, I guess Cleveland would kind of have to be one of the picks, right? Because you go Baltimore and Cincy.
It'll be hard to replicate what they did defensively in the regular season again. And Deshaun Watson, they don't have Joe Flacco anymore. So, it's going to be on, that's not something I thought I would say, but, they're going to be depending on Deshaun Watson, who really hasn't shown much since being traded to Cleveland. So I think that would be the obvious pick to kind of fall off. And, we'll see with the Steelers. But like you said, Mike Tomlin doesn't miss the playoffs.
Doesn't miss the playoffs. I mean, 3 teams from the North made it last year. So, like, are we putting the Jets? Somebody now look, Indy won 9 games. Like, there were a couple teams last year. You look up, you're like, oh, Indy won 9 games. Wow, right? I mean, Denver won 8. Like, could Denver? Is Bo Nix going to step in and be solid?
I don't know, I was not.
They just won 8 games somehow.
It's possible. I mean, Sean Payton's a great coach, and if that's one of the biggest bets that I've seen on a quarterback in a long time, because I don't think anybody else had him in the first round, and he picks him top 15. So that's a huge bet. We'll see if it works out. But I mean, he's a good coach, and he'll be able to get something out of him, I think. I don't know if they're going to be a playoff team, but they'll get something out of Nix.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, as someone who watched a lot of Oregon, I liked him. Like, I felt like the right amount. I thought that was the debate all year. Last 2 years was like, who's better, Penix or Nix? Penix or Nix? And I always felt Penix was a superior quarterback, especially as a pro guy. But all right, I told you I'd like to try and end with a guest by asking for a recommendation, any kind of recommendation at all. So, Ted Wynn, what do you recommend?
All right, I'm going to recommend a restaurant in the city. It's called Damn Fine. It is a pizzeria, and they do, I like New York style pizzas, but they do a Neapolitan style pizza. But they do something interesting. I think they pre-bake their dough, and then they put the toppings on and they bake it again. So you get a little bit more crispiness than you typically get from a Neapolitan pizza.
Okay.
And I'm not a pineapple on pizza guy, but they have a pineapple pizza there that is really, really, really good.
All right. Damn Fine.
That's it.
Pizza.
Damn, you pull up things quick.
Yeah, this is all right. I'm with you on the New York style. And this looks amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have a go-to? I'm looking at the menu. For those watching, I've got the menu.
Crab ravioli is really good.
Okay.
That's on the pasta.
Do you have a go-to pizza on this thing?
I'm a margarita guy,
yeah,
but if you go down a little bit, I think it's the Acapulco.
Yeah. Spicy red sausage, prosciutto, pineapple, jalapeno, mozzarella, pickled onion, habanero, queso fresco, cilantro.
Yeah, I'm typically, I don't like going too crazy on the pizzas, but I just decided to order that one day, and it blew me away. It was really good.
Damn Fine. That is Ted's recommendation. All right. That's a great rec. Do you ever watch that show on local? It's on like the PBS, the Bay Area PBS station. I forget the name. It's like a food show. I've told it's been going for like 30 years. It's a really good show. And anytime it's why am I blanking on it? Maybe Check Please or something like that.
Yes, I think that's it.
It's so good. I love that. My wife laughs at me because like she'll walk in. I'm just, they just have 3 people from the community, and the hostess, she's excellent. And I think she's been doing it a long time. And they just go and they go eat places, and they always pick good stuff. So, and the reason I thought of it is because I feel like maybe this place, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe your spot's been on that show. Could be wrong about that. But all right, Ted Wynn, in The Athletic, the YouTube channel is growing.
Yep, welcome, NFL.
Welcome to the YouTube game.
Thank you,
Ted. Appreciate you making time, man. Oh, and by the way, I do have to say, Bob Biggs was I did a little Google.
Yes,
that was the UC Davis, and I said Jim Soker, and any UC Davis fan will know he's a famous football coach who last coached football in 1988. So that was not the guy who was there when Ted was there.
Yeah,
Dan Hawkins just left.
I was born '89, so
yeah, so just missed him.
Yeah,
just missed him. All right, Ted. Thanks for doing this, man.